Hello, genealogists. It's Craig from Just Genealogy again. So, today I want to talk about preparing to write, creating the environment that will allow you to become a person who actually writes. I am writing every single day, and I'm going to share with you how I get it done. So, let's talk about prepare to write. There are a few things I want to share with you as we go down this road together. One is that bad habits make time your enemy, good habits make time your ally. James Clear is pretty good about coming up with catchy statements that seem to do me a lot of good. But my experience is that you can waste a lot of time writing. Today, hopefully, I will get you down the road so you can waste less time. We're going to talk about the situation, the environment, the psychology, and the setting of the mood in order for you to write. Recognize that there's not one solution that fits everyone, but there are questions that you can ask that will help you to determine if the answers will help you figure out why sometimes you can write and sometimes you just can't. We have to recognize that writing is a social activity. We actually write for others, but usually we do it in solitude. Isn't that really a contradiction? I don't know about you, but when I'm writing, I like minimal distraction, some distraction, but I don't like children crying in the background. Much like being on an airplane, I don't like children crying. Doesn't bother me, but I don't like it. Sometimes we might write for us and for us alone. And I think the best example of that is I treat myself as a client and write client reports for myself when I'm doing my own family genealogy, which unfortunately happens very rarely. So the physical environment is very important to your ability to write. And what we're going to try to do is identify the pieces that make up that physical environment that are important. And remember again, no one size fits all. In fact, over time, there may be many sizes. And what I mean by that is sometimes it depends on the stage of writing that you are in as to what your environment needs to look like. But everything you do needs to support your writing. Do you need an office? I have one. In fact, I have two. Does that office need to be outside of the house? I have one in the house and one in the warehouse. So I have both. However, they're decidedly different. One is a single screen, the other is three screens. But I have both. Now, I'd like for you to take a moment and write down a few notes about the physical environment that you work in. Did you list the distractions? Your space may vary. Some people write in hotel rooms. Personally, I can't do that. Every single time I say, when I go on a trip, I'm going to do this in the hotel room, it never gets done. I can't explain it. I just am unable to write in a hotel rooms. Some people write in an office. That's where I do most of my writing, is in an office, sitting at a desk. Some people go to the library to write. I would do that, except every single time I go to the library, somebody interrupts me. And I don't like to be interrupted while I'm writing. I love being interrupted. Don't misunderstand when I'm doing something other than writing, but when I'm in the midst of writing, I don't like to be interrupted. Now, there are varying kinds of writing, in that if I'm writing a handout, I don't mind. If I'm writing a PowerPoint presentation, I don't mind. If I'm writing an article or a book, I mind. Some people go to a coffee shop. I wouldn't be able to do that. There would just be, as much as I love distraction, there would be too much distraction. And I'd always be getting up to get another cup of coffee and having to stand in line, and that would interrupt my flow. Some people have a specific place at home where they can go and shut the door and write. And when the door's shut, everybody in the house knows mommy or daddy is writing, leave them alone. The level of sound may also vary. Some people need it to be absolutely quiet. Some people need the sound of the TV or music playing. I happen to be one of those kinds of people. I like to write with the sound of the TV down low or some music. Some people need their earbuds in both ears. I can't deal with that. Earbuds are always falling out of my ears, so that just doesn't work for me. Absolute quiet doesn't work for me either because if it's too quiet, I think something's wrong. So I need to have some sound. Not loud, not invasive, but some sound. There's also the issue of the level of light. Some people write better in the dark. Some prefer dim light. Some prefer normal light. Some prefer bright light or sunlight. Personally, I'm a bright light or sunlight person. I love the light streaming in through the window over my shoulder when I'm writing. Of course, at my office in the warehouse, that doesn't happen. So let's talk about your work and desk space. Do you have one of these? I have 3 screens, but it's not one of these. This one would probably give me a crick in my neck. But I write better when I have 3 screens than when I only have one. Do I have one of these? Yes, I do. I probably mentioned before that I have one of these, but I don't use it. But I'm thinking about using it by creating a separate desk so that I can stand in one desk and sit at another. I write better when I'm sitting than when I'm standing, but I once stood for 7 months and had no place to sit, and I wrote 2 books, and I had to start wearing Job stockings because the edema in my ankles was getting fairly large. Not a good sign. What is your chair style? I found that when I got a proper chair, and I have proper chairs in both offices, that my writing improved because I could sit longer. As it is, I can probably sit for about an hour at a time, maybe 2. But the right chair is very important. Sometimes I put a pillow on the chair just to improve the cushioning of it all. Now, there are some ergonomic principles and checklists for selection of office furniture and equipment. I haven't found a U.S. National Occupational Health and Safety Commission, but I was able to find one from Australia, and they had a pretty picture. And you can tell from this pretty picture how old it actually is, since it has a phone, not like a normal phone. It has a microfiche reader, and who has I own microfiche readers. I own more than one, and I have microfilm readers too, but they're not on my desktop. And I can't remember the last time I broke them out. And see the word modem there? That's interesting. But what this does give you, and I'm not sure what a trolley is, what this does give you is the sense of optimistness in regards to your ability to reach and what's close to you. So it's something to think about. Your printer should be within hand's distance. Your monitor should be within hand's distance. Your microphone should be within hand's distance. Paper should be close by. I'll pretend a trolley is a bookcase. That should be close by too. As I've always said, I have a 3-foot bookcase, a 10-foot bookcase, and a 1 1/10 bookcase. So as a function of things I need. I'm spending most of my time in the 1 1/10 space, so it's very frustrating when my 3-foot books are a 1 1/10 away, but you get used to it after a while. So are you a cluttered or neat freak? Albert Einstein said, if a cluttered desk is a sign of a cluttered mind, then what do we think of an empty desk? Well, the truth of the matter is there's no evidence that he actually said this, but I am a firm believer that I have a cluttered desk, although I clean it off once a week. Every Saturday morning, my task is to clean my desk off, but that's more so I don't lose sight of things. The question, though, is, does clutter impede or facilitate your writing? For me, it does neither. It doesn't get in the way of my writing, and it doesn't improve my writing. Clutter for me is very neutral. Does your writing desk need to be precisely arranged? Mine doesn't, but I know I have friends whose writing desk looks the same every time I see it. Mine doesn't look the same every time I see it. Then there's the issue of bookcases. Now, this is my 10-foot space. I'm sitting at my desk looking off to the left at my 10-foot space, and behind me is my 3-foot space. And my mile and a tenth space is 20,000 books. So these are just the books that I use a lot of. There are some other options. Some people like to work in bed. I'm not one of them. Truman Capote said that he was a completely horizontal author. He couldn't think unless he was laying down, either in bed or stretched out on a couch. He didn't use a typewriter, not in the beginning. He'd write his first version out on longhand pencil. Then he'd do a complete revision, also in longhand. And eventually he thought of himself as a stylist, and stylists can become notoriously obsessed with the placing of a comma, the weight of a semicolon. Obsessions of this sort and the time I take over them irritate me beyond endurance. Well, the truth of the matter, I could do none of this. I'm not a horizontal author, and I think a lot while I'm laying down, but I surely do not write while I'm laying down, and I do not write stretched out on a couch. I don't write longhand except notes to myself. I don't use a typewriter. Who uses a typewriter anymore? Although I do have an IBM Selectric in another office. It's not hooked up. And I very rarely worry about commas or semicolons to the extent that it would irritate me beyond endurance. I just put it in and hope. James Joyce, Marcel Proust, Mark Twain, George Orwell, William Wordsworth also wrote in bed. Proust wrote in bed because it was there is where he spent most of his time. Again, I'm not one of those people. Laugh if you like, but Mark Twain said, just try it in bed sometime. I sit up with a pipe in my mouth, a board on my knees, and I scribble away, thinking easy work, and there isn't much labor in moving your fingers sufficiently to get the words down. I haven't smoked since 1992, and I never would dream of smoking in bed. Not on my list of things. So that's the joy of old school, I guess. Not me. There also is the issue of time of day. I'm finding more and more that I'm writing more in the morning. I very rarely write at noon, unless it's indexing. And I'm finding that I write actually better at night. But what interferes with that now is all those webinars that are available at 8 o'clock at night, Eastern Standard Time. So it's interfering with my writing, so I may start writing a little bit earlier. So late afternoon, I may start writing. But I'm a time of day person. Noon is just pretty much out for me, unless it's just straight indexing. Morning, it's early morning. Like if I wake up at 5, I'll start writing maybe at 5 or 6 and write until 8 or 9 kind of thing. But it's not my happiest time for writing. Probably night is my happiest time. But I generally don't write past 11 o'clock because I'm a firm believer in the number one tool available to genealogists that few genealogists use, and that is sleep. I think that sleep is very important to writing. Thomas Wolfe was one of those people who wrote at night. But then I think that mistake that I was just talking about is how many times have you stayed up till 3 a.m. to finish a report? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a scheduled time to write, where you write every day at the same time kind of thing. You may change it up, but generally you have scheduled time in order to write. F. Scott Fitzgerald was an afternoon writer. Morning writers were Hemingway, Mead, Frank Lloyd Wright. So you can see that it's all over the place. It's different. You have to find where you are most comfortable writing. Then you have the issue of food or drink. Do you need to be full before you start? Do you need food as a stimulant? I like to have a cup of coffee when I'm writing. I do not use sugar. I do not use milk. It's just black coffee. And I surely am not going to get a donut. Water is available. And alcohol is available, but rarely do I imbibe while I'm writing. There are times when I may imbibe because I'm stuck. And I just decide I want to chill, I want to relax, I want to get away from it. And a single malt scotch will come to my rescue every so often, but not with any regularity. It's just a way to take a break. Mark Twain began his day with a heavy breakfast. I don't do heavy breakfast. Do you have a dress code? Or are you one of those people that is in a robe and slippers? It doesn't matter, but you may improve your situation and put yourself in the mood for writing if you do have a dress code. Do you have to be surrounded by personal things? What makes the space personal? Well, I have this little, I don't know what it is. It's an animal that I've had for years. And that's the only piece of personality that I have with me. And he just looks at me like I'm a fool. Your mood. If you're angry or upset or having an emotional time, whatever, you're really in the mood to write? Not me. So I wait for the moment. I may go for a week without writing anything intense. I write every day, but the intense things I may have to write for the right moment. There is the thing that I've called the Pareto Principle that I've talked to you all before about, and that's 80% of outcomes are a function of 20% of work. In other words, 80% of your ink on paper is a result of 20% of productive writing. So you've got this wasted 80% there somehow. And your goal of life is to become as productive as possible. So you want to identify activities that are most productive and make them a priority. There's the issue of, are you able to focus? I think it's important to create a daily, regular routine. And that will allow you to focus better. You need to allocate the time. You need to treat yourself like a client. You may have to negotiate with the person you live with that this is the time that I want to write. Then there's the issue of, are you comfortable? Is your chair good? Is your desk the right height? Is your computer keyboard what you need? Is the air temperature right? I like it to be 68 to 70. I don't like it to be 80, and I don't like it to be 55. What about the air quality? I really don't have those issues. But you might. What do you need? I need the internet, I need my computer, and I also need a writing pad and pencils because I may want to jot notes to myself about something I want to do in the future about something, either with what I'm working on or something else to write about. Because all of a sudden in the process, I've come to a new conclusion and I need to save that conclusion, and it might not have anything to do with what I'm working on at the moment. You need to create a consistent setup that works for you. And you're the only one who can determine what that setup looks like. And it may require experimentation. It may require, I find that sometimes I need an entire table, 5-foot table, empty 5-foot table in order to write appropriately, because I will lay things out in some sort of semblance of order as to how I want to cover things. Are you a person who writes on the move? I'm not. I sit still. But you may be an individual who writes on the move. You may be an individual that is capable of dictating to yourself through some sort of technology that will allow you to create something written. I've never been successful in doing that. I can sit here and talk to this screen all day long, but if I were to, say, driving down the road, turn on a tape recorder of some sort, a memo recorder or something like that, and start talking, it just wouldn't work. It doesn't work like that for me. I think a lot of it has to do with the lack of cues. And you have to have cues. So you also should address the issue of, what is your learning style? How do you learn? Because this might help you write better. What's your routine? Do you need to get yourself into the right mood to write? James Joyce liked to play the piano before he wrote. I don't have a piano. The weirdest ritual I could find was Franz Kafka. Kafka, every time he got ready to write, he would first do 10 minutes of what he called the Mueller technique, a series of swings, stretches, and body weight exercises. After he was finished writing, he did another 10 minutes. And he also did this, did I mention? He did it while he was naked. This is not my forte. This is not how I need to be placed in the mood to write, but this is what worked for him, and it might explain a lot about his writing. Some people vary their environment as a function of what stage of writing they are in. I am like that also, but it largely has to do with noise and distraction about how much I'm willing to accept in the final analysis. So let's go over preparing to write. You want to create a habit, same time every day kind of thing, same setup, same chair height, same noise, everything you need. Do you write from the perspective of case study, comparison, description, evaluation, exploratory, interpretive, narrative? I don't even know what all those things mean. But if you were to approach them, you may find solace in how you're writing. I find that I'm gradually becoming a case study person out of necessity, whereas before I probably was a descriptive or narrative person. But now I'm becoming more and more case study oriented. So, what do you do to make it readable? I use a style sheet. Part of my planning process is to create a style sheet before I do something, create an outline or a storyboard after that. So basically, I know what it's going to look like when it's done. I may not know what the content is when I start, what the full content is. I know what the high level content is. But when it's all said and done, my style sheet determines what it will look like when it's all over with. I have a problem with passive voice. Hemingway Editor is the best way that I have learned to help me get rid of my passive voice. I don't know why I have a passive voice. Maybe I talk in passive voice. I don't have a clue. I just know that when I write, Hemingway Editor helps me dramatically change my passive voice. And it also, I have a habit of talking in big words, and I have a habit in writing in big words. And sometimes the Hemingway Editor will tell me that my target audience is much higher than I want it to be. I'm not interested in writing for normally a college student. I'm more interested in writing for a middle school or freshman and high school level so that everybody understands what I'm talking about. So you want to prepare the topic. And how do you prepare the topic? I find that planning is the way to prepare your topic. You want to have some pre-writing strategies, whether it be listing, whether it be clustering, like mind mapping, idea mapping, free writing, or looping. So I've tried all of these things. My sense is that for me, listing works the best, but sometimes free writing comes to my rescue and I don't even realize that it's doing it. There are other problems. There is writer's block, there's writing anxiety, and there's procrastination. I suffer from writer's block, sometimes imposter syndrome, and I always procrastinate. With writer's block, my experience is that if I go do something else, I'm able to come back. If I play, take a walk, cook something, I'm good. Or if I'm really stuck, free write may come to my rescue, and not very often, but in fact, less often than I thought when I talked about it a couple of weeks ago. And then I realized I actually was using it without knowing that I was using it. So this is a technique that involves continuous writing for a short period of time without regard to spelling, grammar, and without correction. The writer it's like brainstorming. The writer freely strays off topic and it's just like, just write to write. And my experience is that sometimes I just write to write. Writer's anxiety is pretty much the same thing. But what you have to recognize is that writer's block and writer's anxiety, in my mind anyway, are situational. And if you change your situation will improve. Stephen Colbert, in a show a couple of months ago, said, I go to put my fingers to the keyboard and I am stricken with imposter syndrome. And that just struck me as I suffer from imposter syndrome all the time. That's why I do Stump Craigs, is because it proves to me that I'm not the imposter that I think I am. But I am obviously, how am I qualified to write about this? Why am I qualified to write about this? And I just have to get over myself and recognize I'm qualified to write about this because you know what I'm doing? I'm writing about it. Well, Amanda Peet was there when he was discussing this, and they were discussing the paralyzing fear associated with writing. And Colbert said, how do you get over it? How do you motivate yourself? And Amanda Peet said, I drink. And Colbert just said, oh, there it is. And the truth of the matter is, if I have paralyzing fear about something, I'm not going to drink. If I have paralyzing fear about it, I'm going to go study some more. Because obviously I don't know enough about a subject in order to do something about it, or in order to write about it. I am someone who uses procrastination all the time. It's how I get things done. In order for me to get things done quickly and rapidly, they have to become the priority. There has to be a deadline. And it has to be a deadline imposed by someone else, not a deadline imposed by me. So right now, this minute, this video is for tomorrow. There are no videos stacked up. I had a few stacked up, but there are no videos stacked up today. So I have to do this today in order for it to run tomorrow. So therefore, it's being done right now. And in 2 hours, there's a webinar that I have to listen to. Actually, it's not a webinar, it's a writer's SIG. So if you don't belong, I should say this here before I forget. You should belong to the Association of Professional Genealogists because they're full of genealogical writers. And as a member of the Association of Professional Genealogists, you should belong to a SIG that Michael Haight and I helped create called the Writer's SIG, where every month we get together and we talk about writing one way or the other. Some lecturer comes and talks to us about how to write for them, or how to improve your writing, or what tools you can use for writing, all kinds of stuff. It's probably one of the best special interest groups that I've ever belonged to. So the Writer's SIG, Association of Professional Genealogists, don't forget. Anyway, procrastination. So, work expands to fill the amount of time available for its completion. That's C. Northcote Parkinson, I think, who said that. Do you have a looming deadline? The type 1 person generates negative feelings, fear, stress, anxiety associated with a deadline. Maybe you're not well suited for procrastination. I'm not a type 1 person. I don't get negative feelings because things are due. I don't have time for it. I have to get it done. He says that delay is the deadliest form of denial. Well, that's true, but there comes a point where you can't delay anymore, regardless of how much you deny, because your reputation is at stake. So the type 2 person says, now it's a priority, so let's get it done, and avoids distractions and further delays. In other words, they're not looking at their email anymore 25 times a day. They're only looking at it once a day because they have something to get done. They are able to shut down Facebook and YouTube and everything else, electronics, email, whatever. And when you do all that, it takes less time to get the job done. It helps if you think about it for a long time before you actually have to get it written. In other words, plan. And most of all, allow yourself time to relax. Because if you're not relaxed while you're writing, it's going to come through in your writing. So what I believe in is focused procrastination. That the busiest people are the people who have time to spare. And I actually got that from my mother. Focused procrastination, it is the busiest man who has time to spare, is something that Parkinson said. But what my mother taught me was that you never ask someone who's doing nothing to do something because they don't know how. And what she meant by that was always ask the busiest people to help you because the busiest people know how to help you. So then we have to deal with the concept of long-term thinking. You might get stuck in a rut. I've got a project I've been working on for 35 years called War of 1812 Dead. I need to get it done. But nobody has come to me and said, you must get it done by this, whereas people have come to me and said, you have to do this, 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 and this by this time. So therefore, that gets in the way. So I still haven't got to the point where my long-term projects actually have priority. There also is the danger of routine. I know that I have a pattern of falling into routines that seem to decline in their productivity over time. So every once in a while, you have to change your routines up in order to maintain your productivity. So in other words, if you're used to writing at night and you're not being able to find the time to write at night, when you're supposed to be allocating time, move it to the morning. Change things up. So write at different times during the day. Change the place where you write. I've got a couple of different tables in the warehouse that I can move to and write. And sometimes it's a function of what the heat is like in the warehouse. Sometimes it's cooler in other places than others. And I remind myself about my 5 rules and my rule number 5, which is if it isn't broken, don't fix it. But if it's worked for 10 years, it needs fixing. Well, you're never going to have a routine that's going to last 10 years. So recognize, though, that sometimes don't get caught in the rut of, well, I've always done it this way, so I need to continue to do it this way. Just recognize when you may have to change things up. Find out what you prefer. And I don't care how strange it may seem to anyone else. It's frankly none of their business as long as you produce product and get that product out there. So I have, for instance, I have a writing goal of once a quarter I write for the magazine of Virginia Genealogy. Once a quarter. So that there always is an article there. I write for the National Genealogical Society where I will submit an article to them as part of my BCG renewal every 5 years. I'd like to be able to do it more often, but with everything I'm doing, it's kind of tough to do an NGSQ article every year. Whatever you do, stick to that, be regular, make it a habit. So, 2 final thoughts. Just 2 final thoughts. Professionals are the architects of their habits. Amateurs are the victims of their habits. Remember James Clear, who we started with? That's the first thing. So don't be an amateur. Don't be a victim of your habit. Be the architect of your habit. And then what's the most important tool in a writer's life? Think for a moment. It's not a pencil. It's not a pen. It's sleep. It's a condition of the body and mind such that it typically reoccurs for several hours every night, in which the nervous system is relatively inactive, the eyes are closed, the postural muscles relaxed, and the consciousness practically suspended. Don't forget your need for sleep. Now, go start writing. So this has been Craig, and this has been Just Genealogy, where we are converting people doing genealogy into genealogists day by day. I appreciate all of you very much. We're getting those numbers up. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. Don't forget to hit that bell so you get notified. We're putting something out every day at noon. In my procrastination, it may get done at 11 o'clock, but that's happened a couple of times so far in the past 40 or some videos. So here we go. And I will see you tomorrow.